Warning. This episode contains extremely dark and disturbing materials. For anyone that's easily triggered, it's best to proceed with caution. And if you have a weak stomach, then click off of this video and pretend you never even saw it.
With these steps on this lonesome path outside, carrying the memories of times gone by. Moonlight casting shadows falling wide, in the silence of the night where I hide. I wander through these empty streets, every echo with the tale we'll never see. But love is calling, heavy on my soul. Gotta keep moving. I'm running down this lonely road in the night, hiding from the shadows outside. Living on the secrets I've been keeping.
Running from the past, hiding in the dark, searching for the love to light my spark. Chasing dreams of the I just sing along to this cool country song. I don't know the words, so the lyrics are wrong. Driving down the road so dark and long, searching for a home, a place I belong. Got dark and depressing, got me confessing. Wish this guy behind me would drive around me. Seriously, take the hint. And seriously, dude, just go around. Stop riding my ass. Seriously,
That's not
seriously,
what the
just
argument
let me
is,
ask
though.
you
You
this.
can't be-
Hey,
no,
give me
no,
a sec. Let me ask you
okay,
this. All right, fine.
The shadows that hide, searching for the light.
Welcome back to Reach Radio. I'm your host, August. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. Joel's over Atlanta. Are they real? Holden glanced in the rearview mirror at the truck behind him. It had been following him for the past hour, and instead of simply driving around him, it stayed on his bumper, almost threatening to push him off the road. Come on, man, just go around already. Just go! Holden complained loudly to himself in the cabin of his own truck before he rolled down the window and waved his hand impatiently into the air. It's Kansas, man. Nobody's gonna see you cross the fucking line. Just go. Jesus Christ. The other vehicle continued to ignore the many chances Holden gave and stayed right where it was. Fucking hell, man. Eventually, the truck driver could see the welcoming lights of a stop ahead in the distance. Holden let out a long sigh as he pulled into the parking lot. The stop consisted of a gas station, motel, and a bar. Holden was extremely happy to see the latter. Finally, get off my ass and get a drink. The man muttered to himself as he stepped out of the vehicle and began to walk towards the bar, when the truck that had been following him pulled up near. Holden let out a chuckle and shook his head, making an obvious sign of annoyance as he walked through the front door. He was met with the sound of country music and lively conversations from the many people scattered about. Holden sat down at the bar, removed his hat, and rubbed his tired eyes. How are you doing tonight, sir? The bartender asked as he set a coaster down in front of the truck driver. Oh, tired. Very tired. Can I get a Kilman Stout, please? Holden asked with a sigh. As the bartender got to work, Holden turned to face the stage, surprised at not just the number of people here, but that they had live music playing. It was probably just a local band. Their sound was simple but pleasant, easy on the ears. Holden found himself tapping his finger to the tune on the bar's counter and took a sip of the dark drink when it was placed next to him. The man was about to take another sip when the front door opened as a stranger entered and locked eyes with Holden. The truck driver watched as he slowly and awkwardly strolled over to the bar. The man's movements were stiff and unnatural, drawing others' attention to him. The man sat down in the chair next to Holden and stared at him. A crooked smile slowly began to spread across his face. Holden turned away from him for a moment to take another sip. He knew that this was probably the same guy who had been riding his ass the past few miles, and opened his mouth to say something when an unexpected sound caught him off guard. The stranger's face was suddenly way too close to Holden's. His nostrils flared as he breathed in deeply. "What the hell, man?" Holden loudly complained and pulled away. "I know your smell." Holden could feel the color drain away from him, and his world suddenly shrink. There was no way. No way it was him. But it was. This was the same man. No. It's you. The smile on the stranger's face spread even wider. Impossible. So, you do remember me. I must admit, I was not quite positive it was you. Caught your scent on the air miles back. Had to know for sure. You could have just kept your window up. I would have never known and just driven right on by. But you had to have a smoke. The scent still lingers in your clothes, soaked into your skin. Always adds a bit of flavor. Holden couldn't move. He couldn't think. There was just no way it could be him. And yet, here he was, in the flesh, after all this time. And he hadn't aged a day. "Sir, please do not hassle my other customers," the bartender told the man, his body pulled away and his face showing unease after overhearing the conversation. "The name is Jack, and don't you worry none. See, the two of us, our old acquaintances. Isn't that right, Holden?" You... Cat got your tongue. That's fine. I will play the cat. You can play the mouse. You got away once. Maybe you'll do it again. A rare thing to pull off with me, though. Well, go on. I will even give you a head start. Just know, when I catch you, and I will, I am going to rape your corpse before I eat you. Just like I did your mother. Holden finally moved as he felt himself fall back out of his chair, causing many people in the place to turn and face him. A quiet fell upon the room. Go on and run, Holden. There is nowhere you can hide. That's it. Get the hell out of my bar, freak. The bartender yelled at Jack, aggressively pointing towards the door that Holden began to crawl backwards for. Jack's face slowly turned to face the man behind the bar. Make me. In response, the bartender pulled out a shotgun and aimed it at Jack, which caused him to let out a deep laugh, one filled with evil. Seriously, don't make me... The deafening blast of the shotgun filled the bar, followed by surprised yelps.
Whoa, man, holy shit. The hell was that?
Then the screaming began. Shit! What the hell? Call the cops!
Oh my god, holy fuck.
People stood up in a panic as they stared at the gory scene before them. In one quick motion, Jack had disarmed the bartender and used his own weapon against him. The man's head and several bottles behind him exploded and coated the area behind the bar with blood, brains, alcohol, and glass shards. His headless body stumbled back and fell to the side, bringing a shelf down with it. Jack slowly turned to stare at Holden, who had succumbed to the crippling fear again. Last chance, Mouse. You better start moving. With that final statement, Jack aimed the gun at another nearby customer and fired, killing them instantly. More screams erupted as the psycho began to randomly fire at the people around him. Holden finally began to move with several others for the door and barely made it through when another blast followed them out, causing one victim's body to knock Holden to the ground. He could feel the warmth of the stranger's blood and struggled to stand as more people swarmed over him. They stepped on the back of the dead body, holding him down. Their steps crushed Holden's fingers with their boots as they retreated. The man finally managed to wrench himself away from the dead weight and ran for his truck. He could still hear the laughter from Jack back in the bar, in between the sound of gunfire. Holden fumbled as he tried to open the door to his truck and cursed before finally getting it open. As he climbed into the driver's seat, there was a sudden banging noise on the passenger side door. Holden jumped in his seat before realizing it was a person begging to be let in. Please, let me in! The man smacked the window repeatedly with bloodied hands, his wide eyes filled with terror. Holden hesitated for the briefest moment before he unlocked the door and let the man inside. Thank you. Holden nodded and turned the key. His truck started with a roar, and the wheels spun away a stream of gravel as Holden planted his foot and pedaled to the floor. He and his passenger gave a quick glance back at the bar. Jack had just made his way outside and stepped over several bodies. The cat gave a wave to the mouse as the truck drove away. Holden remembered. It had been early in the morning, before the sun rose. 3 a.m. to be precise. He had heard a loud noise, which caused him to sit up quickly in his bed. Mom? Dad? He shouted down the darkened hallway beyond the open door to his room. No response. Quiet. The little boy rubbed the sleep away from his eyes and placed a foot down onto the cold wooden floor, which gave a low creak below his steps. He slowly made his way down the hall to his parents' bedroom. Hello? He pushed the door open. He saw what was inside. Holden's dad had recently explained the birds and the bees to his son, so Holden thought he had accidentally walked in on them. He turned away in embarrassment to leave when he saw his dad laying on the floor, his eyes open, red gathered around him, But if that's Dad, then who? Holden, his innocent mind still unable to piece together the event, slowly moved to the other side of the bed. His mom, dead eyes open, staring, her body moving under the man on top of her. Sweat rolled off his arched back. "Mom?" His voice caused everything happening to stop. The unknown man's face slowly turned to face him. His eyes seemed to glow in the dark. His mouth pulled too far apart, his teeth crooked. "Yo, Mom is a bit busy." Holden finally understood. He turned to run. He could hear the monster's voice calling after him as he sprinted down the hallway. "Run, little boy, run! I will remember your smell." Holden was frozen in place, his hands glued to the steering wheel. The memory he had tried so hard to forget, one he begged to repress, had taken a hold of him, had brought him back in time to witness something again in full clarity. He had been like this for several minutes, silent, just driving down the long, dark road. "I left my phone on the table," an unknown voice spoke, bringing Holden back to reality with a start. He had completely forgotten about the random man he had allowed into his truck. "What?" Holden replied. His mind had been unable to process everything properly. "My phone. I left it at the bar." "Oh." There was a long silence before the man spoke up again. "Can I borrow yours to call the police?" "Oh, yeah. Yeah, man." Holden handed over his phone to the man. His unblinking eyes stared straight ahead as he drove. "Thanks, man. Seriously. Thanks. I just wanted to get out of there. I didn't drive. My buddy, he had the keys. I saw him get hit. I panicked. I don't know if he's dead or not." The man sat in silence for a moment longer, staring out the window at the endless fields of corn beyond, before finally dialing the number. "Yeah, hi, I want to report a shooting. Hey, a mass shooting. Yeah. I'm sorry, I think I'm still in shock. I'm sorry. Yeah, it was off the I-70 at a bar called The Strum. Yeah. My name's Keith. Some guy, something happened. The bartender pulled a gun on him, and then he grabbed the gun and started shooting people. I don't know how many died. He was wearing a blue or gray shirt, black pants, I think. Tall, skinny, kind of lanky. Black hair. I just got out of there. Some guy let me hop in his truck. They want to know your name. Holden. His name's Holden? Yeah. We're heading west. I don't know where the next stop is. I'm not from Kansas. My friend and I were heading to his brother's place for a party. Yeah. Yes, let me check. Hey, Holden? Do you have a map, or do you know where the next stop is? I'm not stopping, Holden told Keith without looking away. They're asking us to pull over at the next safe spot and wait for them. Nowhere's safe. Not from him. There was a silence in the cabin for a moment. Wait. Do you know the guy that was shooting everyone? Holden struggled to form a response for Keith, causing his passenger to suddenly feel uneasy. I think Holden knows the guy that did the shooting. Yeah. Okay. Hey, listen, man. They really want you to pull over. They want you to answer some questions. I'm not pulling over. I'm getting as far away from here as I can get. Dude, I mean, can you at least let me out then? Holden held his tongue for a moment before letting out a sigh. Yeah, I'll let you out the next stop, but I'm leaving. I'll call the cops when I've gotten far enough away. If I do. Okay, thanks. Yeah, he says he's gonna let me out at the next stop. He says he'll call you guys later. I don't think so. I think that's the best you're gonna get from him. He seems really spooked. Can't say I blame him. The next stop was another gas station, many miles from where the massacre had unfolded. Holden didn't even pull into the lot, but simply stopped in the middle of the road. Keith opened the passenger door and stepped out. Thanks, Holden. Seriously, you saved my life tonight. I don't know what's going on or how you know that man, but I personally don't care. All I know is I might not be standing here if you hadn't let me in. Thanks. Holden impatiently sighed and gave a quick nod. Yeah, man, no problem. Stay safe out there, man. Keith smiled and nodded before swinging the door shut. As Holden pulled away, a sudden pair of bright lights appeared behind his truck, causing Holden to glance in his side mirror. He watched a startled Keith disappear in between the lights. Shit, it's him! Holden could feel his heart sink as the hauntings of his past caught up to him. The sudden jolt of contact from the other vehicle caused Holden's truck to lurch to the side before he regained control. Shit! The lights fell back for a moment, and then the cat's truck picked up speed again, ramming the back of Holden's with even more force. The mouse slammed the gas pedal down as far as it would go and tried to put even more distance between the two of them. But Jack was persistent, and his truck faster. No matter what Holden did, Jack was there, still right on his bumper, ramming it and constantly honking his horn. Holden could picture the smile and laughter on Jack's face as he struggled to remain on the road. He even began to wonder if he should go off the road and drive through the fields. Maybe he could lose Jack like that. The man found himself suddenly praying, something he had not done in many years, hoping there was indeed someone out there, anyone that could help.
Please, God, please, help me, please.
Holden's prayers were answered when out of the darkness, far ahead of him, came the comforting flashing of red and blue lights.
Yes,
Holden said to himself. A smile quickly made its way across his face.
Thank you, Lord.
This feeling was short-lived, as the next collision was the hardest yet. This one forced Holden to jerk off the side of the road. The sudden dip of the street slowly caused his truck to tip over, and the vehicle landed on its side with a hard impact. Holden's vision went black as the airbag went off. Holden remembered. He remembered the police. He remembered them asking him questions. He remembered when they called his aunt, and the wait for her to get to the station. Her crying with relief that Holden was all right, and with sorrow after learning the fate of her sister. She held him tight, so tight. Her body shuddered. She had taken the boy back to her home, where he would now live. For several weeks, the police had watched over the house, making sure his parents' killer didn't come to finish off the boy. Holden had been so worried. He couldn't sleep. He would look out the window at night. He remembered just how scared he was. Every time he saw the lights of cars driving through the unfamiliar neighborhood, his little heart would fill with terror, wondering if it was the killer, wondering if he had found him. He remembered the relief he felt when those cars continued to drive by. He would watch their rear lights disappear into the distance, hoping they wouldn't suddenly stop and slowly begin to reverse. If they did, Holden would have to run again. The sounds of sirens and a loud, warped voice slowly pulled at Holden until he snapped awake with a gasp. He found himself hanging sideways in his truck, blood dripping from his broken nose. It would have been a lot worse if he had not been wearing his seatbelt. Fuck! Holden groaned and struggled for a moment in his awkward position. As his fingers began to fumble for the seatbelt, a light from the driver's window shone in. Holden covered his face and a voice came from the other side of the door. "Sir, are you okay?" The concerned voice asked. "Can you hear me?"
Yeah, but I'm just stuck.
I'm okay. I'm okay. Don't worry. The officer pulled open Holden's door with some effort. I'll get you out of there. Here, give me your hand so you don't fall. Put your feet up on the wheel on the dash. Yeah, like that. Now, if you can, just unclip your seatbelt. Holden did as he was told, but as he unclipped himself, the man lost his footing and fell back into the truck. His body landed on the passenger side with a loud thud, which caused pain to shoot across his back. Oh. Shit! Are you okay, sir? The officer asked, his face wincing in pain in response to Holden's landing. Ow! Was all the truck driver was able to get out. Shit! Hold on! I'll break through the front window. Get away from the glass and cover your eyes. The officer told him and climbed down from the truck's side. Beyond the cracked windshield, Holden could hear another's voice over a megaphone.
Sir, step out of the truck now! Put your hands on your head! Don't you... put the weapon down! Put it down now or we will open fire!
Holden could see the officer on the other side of the glass glance around the corner for a minute to see what was happening, before he went back to help Holden escape. As the officer began to smash away at the windshield, Holden listened to the voice as it continued.
I said, put the weapon down! Now! This is your last warning!
The window cracked open enough for Holden to escape, and just as the officer helped him through the hole, the sound of gunfire beyond the rows of corn rang out. The officer and Holden struggled over to the commotion, with the officer in the lead, his gun already in his hand. The two of them emerged just in time to see multiple officers unloading on the approaching Jack. Their bullets hitting the man, but doing nothing. What the fuck? The officer next to Holden whispered and raised his gun to help. When Jack's body began to split and fold away from itself, the inside of the monster's body was suddenly exposed. The inside was not normal. The inside was nothing but teeth, sharp and crooked, yellow and brown, folding fangs, rolling and twisting. They spread across Jack's body, and soon there was nothing but a shapeless mass of grinding teeth that suddenly flew forward. The stunned officers were immediately consumed by the dreadful maw as it tore into them, rending their flesh and shredding them to pieces. Sprays of blood and gore flew into the air that covered the entire road. 3 officers began to run away from the others that were being eaten alive by the spreading and twisting filed fangs. The constant cracking and grinding noises of the bones and teeth caused Holden to cover his ears. Yet the man continued to watch the horror unfold before his eyes, in utter disbelief at what he was witnessing. Go! Run! The other 3 officers could be heard yelling from this distance as they tried to climb into one of their cars. One wasn't fast enough. The man was pulled back away from the others. He screamed as he was processed through a long tunnel of teeth. His blood and bones spilled all the way down the line until he reached the end, where only a shoe emerged. The other 2 officers had barely managed to get into the car before it was lifted off the ground by a swirling vortex of gnashing and clacking fangs. The car and the officers were completely consumed by the churning maw. And then the world went quiet. Like Holden, The officer next to him stood in shocked silence. The two of them watched as the formless mass of fangs began to reassemble itself back into a normal human, back into Jack, who cracked his neck and smiled wide. That was fun. What a scrumptious meal. Now then. Jack immediately turned towards Holden's direction. Holden, little mouse, you out there? Can you hear me? I am coming for you next. The two survivors slipped deeper into the cornfield and began to run. Where the hell are we going? Holden asked him as they ran. I don't fucking know, man. Away from that! That thing! You fucking saw that, right? I'm not seeing things? I wish you were, man. That was real. That was fucking real. Shit. What do we do? Wait, do you see that? The officer pointed to an abandoned building ahead of him. Maybe we can hide in there while I call for backup. Backup? Seriously? Do you really think they're gonna help? You saw what that thing did. What else do you want me to do? After a minute or two, they had reached the building and slipped in through the rusty metal door. The empty place seemed to be some kind of abandoned factory, with plenty of room to hide. Holden and the officer quickly found a shadowy spot in the back where they could catch their breath, and after a moment, the officer reached for his radio. 1039 dispatch. We have multiple officers down. I repeat, we have multiple officers down. Please send backup immediately.
Okay, on my way.
As the officer spoke to dispatch, Holden suddenly found himself deep in a memory. One he had completely forgotten until now. Holden remembered. It had been a cloudy day. There had been a knock on the front door of his aunt's home. He remembered holding his breath, waiting to see if it was the killer, ready to run. But it wasn't him. It was a woman, beautiful and tall, short black hair, wearing a long black coat. A pair of dark sunglasses covered her eyes. His aunt asked who she was. The woman flashed his aunt a card. She asked to speak to Holden. The woman asked Holden many questions. She told him, if he ever saw the killer again, to please call this number, day or night. Holden blinked, curious. He still had that card, right? Holden found himself subconsciously removing his wallet from his back pocket. His fingers lightly pulled at the edge of the bent and worn card. There it was. After all these years, he had kept it. He didn't know why. Maybe it was just habit. Or maybe he held on to hope. Holden read the card. He read the number. There's no way they're actually stealing business. Right? It's been years. Holden whipped his phone out anyways and dialed the number. Fell's Agency. Several minutes of uncertainty had passed as Holden and the officer sat quietly in the factory, hiding in the shadows. The officer had his gun drawn, and Holden had found a rusty metal pole, even though it probably wouldn't do anything against that monster. "Holden, are you in there?" came a voice from the other side of the factory wall. The officer held up his hand to quiet Holden, as if he was making a noise. His eyes stared into Holden's with curiosity and mouthed the words, "You know him?" To which Holden gave a quick nod. "I can smell your blood. Followed it here. Had to stop and give it a little taste. Not bad. Not bad at all. Guess it runs in the family. Cannot wait to have a bit more." The door swung open and Jack stepped into the factory. His eyes scanned the area around him. The officer got Holden's attention and motioned for them to silently move back even deeper into the factory. Their footsteps were carefully placed. Not a single sound from either of them. They could hear Jack quietly humming to himself as he searched. 2 sets of footprints. Who else is in here with you? Friend of yours? Well, at least you will not die alone. The sudden crack of glass under the officer's foot was loud, and Jack heard it. "There you are. I see you." The officer turned and aimed his gun at Jack. Don't move!" The officer fumbled his words as he and Holden slowly walked backwards. "Get back!" Jack smiled wide and confidently strolled towards them. "You all say the same thing. You think guns can hurt me? Nothing can hurt me. I am not human. I am a demon. A hungry one." The officer fired once, striking Jack in the eye, which did nothing to stop the man's advance. His laughter echoed throughout the factory, and the officer emptied his magazine at Jack. "We need to run, man!" he shouted to Holden and turned to face him. In that brief moment, Jack had reached the two of them with unnatural speed, and when the officer turned back, he was face to face with Jack. The man's smile stretched wider than it should and began to tear his cheeks open past the corners of his mouth. A giant and toothy maw replaced Jack's head, which bit down on the officer, taking the top of the man away with a crunch as the monster stepped away from the collapsing body. Holden watched as the mouth chewed with relish and dripped with blood. "Fuck this shit!" Holden turned and began to run as far away from Jack as he could. He turned down every path that he could find and continued to run until his sides ached, until he could barely breathe, until he hit a dead end. Holden frantically began to look for another way out, anything, when Jack turned the corner. Holden backed up against the wall. The pipe in his hand slipped and dropped to the ground with a loud clatter. The cat just stood there, smiling, watching as the mouse filled with panic. Jack sniffed the air. That smell. The fear. This is my favorite part. Holden decided to take a chance, the only one he had. He made for the gap between Jack and the industrial equipment, but Jack's fist shot out, knocking Holden to the ground. Holden remembered. He remembered his first day in a new school after his parents' deaths. He remembered how the others treated him. He was the quiet kid, the one everyone whispered about. They knew. They judged him for it. They bullied him. They would knock him to the ground at recess. They would make him bleed. Sometimes Holden would run. Sometimes he would hide. Sometimes he would fight. He wasn't a bad fighter, but there were always more of them. He always lost. Years passed. Holden remembered. He tried to get a job. They didn't want him. Holden tried to find love. His past always scared them away. Holden never wanted to buy a home. He didn't feel safe. Nowhere felt safe. Nothing ever felt safe. Except his truck. In his truck, he could drive and keep driving. Always running. Holden was tired of running. He was tired of being afraid. He didn't want to feel that anymore. He didn't want to. And so he didn't. Holden's eyes opened and stared up into Jack's. He slowly blinked. You all right there? You want to try something else? I'm waiting. Holden stood as quick as he could, surprising Jack when he brought his fist up with him, which cracked the killer under the chin with an uppercut. Jack staggered back and his eyes went wide along with his grin. There we go. Some fighting spirit. Finally. I cannot tell you how tired I get of everyone just running away from me. I'm tired of running. Tired of hiding. You seem to like games. You want to try something new? Try using your fists. None of those teeth. Let's see what you got, Jackie boy. Holden goaded Jack. The man stepped back and raised his fists in front of him. Jack began to laugh. Oh my. You know, this is the most fun I've had with one of my toys in years. Come on then, little mouse. Let the game begin. The two circled each other for several moments before Jack went for a feigned jab and pulled back, chuckling to himself at Holden's reaction, before stepping in and landing a heavy blow against Holden's cheek. The man staggered away, but came back in close and returned 4 wild punches. 2 missed. 2 struck true. Jack ducked under another and kicked out at Holden's stomach, causing the man to briefly collapse and cough, before he rose up again. Holden dodged one of Jack's punches and landed a blow so hard that a tooth went scattering across the floor. Pulling teeth, huh? 1 down. About 1,000 more to go. Jack taunted him and grinned. His one missing tooth was immediately replaced by another. Holden ducked under another one of Jack's punches and pushed the monster back against the wall with a charge, where he proceeded to try and knee Jack over and over in the stomach, but was blocked by the monster's strong hands. Jack brought his elbow down onto Holden's back with a force so strong he could feel one of his ribs crack. Jack threw the man back across the floor, and before Holden could stand, landed a kick, busting the man's lip, which caused blood to gush from Holden's face. Jack grabbed him and landed 4 more punches, each one pushing Holden further towards death. The mouse gasped through blood and darkened vision. He stared up in defeat as the cat stood above him. Jack's face, for the first time in a long time, frowned. You really are not scared of me no more, are you? Holden was the one who smiled now. Jack slowly shook his head. Such a shame. It always tastes better with the fear. Oh well. You will be in my belly soon enough. But I am not done playing with you. This is not over quite yet. Trust me, it's over, came a random voice from someone unseen beyond Holden's vision. Jack lifted his head as multiple green laser sights danced across his body. A gunshot went off, but this time, Jack reared back and screamed in pain. What in the hell? Impossible. He screamed and looked up again as multiple shots of automatic gunfire began to rip through his body. A monstrous roar erupted from the churning teeth that forced their way out of his body. Holden was deafened by the cacophony of noise around him. He watched as the thousands of teeth formed into a separate entity and pulled away from Jack, dropping the man onto the factory floor. The swirling mass of gnashing and grinding teeth and fangs roiled and tried to move throughout the factory like a swarm of starlings, looking for a way to escape. But a sudden and alien sound, followed by some kind of visual pulse, rolled through the air, which caused the teeth to suddenly fall to the ground, scattering in every direction. Holden didn't understand what was happening. He just slowly turned his head and looked in the direction of Jack, who was crawling away. He looked so weak, frail. Multiple figures approached and subdued him, while one, familiar, kneeled down next to Holden. There was no way. It was the woman. The one who gave him the card. The same one. But she hadn't aged a day. How? Holden barely got out. Shh. It is okay, Holden. You're okay. We're going to get you out of here. Holden, you did it. You survived. Holden could feel tears of relief welling up, and he finally, for once in his life, felt safe. Jack couldn't see anything. He couldn't see anything through the bag on his head. He was being dragged somewhere. They had not been gentle. He didn't expect anything less. He had never been gentle. But still, he hated being on the receiving end of this. It reminded him of the old days all over again. Jack suddenly found himself thrown to the ground in a room.
"Is this him?"
Came an old and quivering voice somewhere in the room. There was a pause.
"Remove the hood. Let me see."
Jack was blinded by the light in the room. He winced in pain as he raised his arm to see in front of him.
"Jack, there you are. Crook-Tooth Jack."
The monster smiled when he saw who addressed him. "Old fellow Fells. My. Look at what time has done with you. My, how far you have come." David Fells, now 93 years old, had at last captured his prey. The one he had looked for so long. So many close calls. So many deaths. But he finally had his daughter's killer right here in front of him.
"You did well, Captain Vera."
"Thank you, sir," the woman in black replied to her boss.
"Now go and make sure that the man who called us in is well taken care of."
Vera nodded and glanced at Jack one more time before leaving. Her glowing, blood-red eyes flashed brighter as she walked away. Jack couldn't help but chuckle at the irony of everything. Really, David? Vampires? Hiring monsters to catch other monsters. You see the problem there, right?
Fire with fire. There is no monster worse than you.
Jack's eyebrows raised and he snorted. If you think that, then you really need to get out more. You'd be surprised what you can find living under a rock. David Fells continued his hatred-filled stare into Jack's eyes.
"I'm going to torture you, Jack. I'm going to make it last as long as I can. But not just your body, your soul as well. I'm going to break you, and only when you cry, that's when I know my work is done."
Now, that doesn't sound very nice of you. What would little old Annabelle think about you now? What would she think of her daddy? Jack smiled again, which would be his last smile ever.
I've been running, I've been hiding from the shadows deep inside. Every corner feels so haunting, nowhere left for me to slide. Running and hiding, nowhere to go, chasing my blues
valleys deep and low, trying to find some peace of mind. But these demons won't leave me be. Every step I take, they're right behind. Fading dreams are all I see. Running and hiding every night and day, seeking in life but losing my way.